Andrew.
Drew, you want to do yours first?
Sure. So let me see. Just give me a moment. All right, I'll start sharing my screen. So Doug, who worked in the summer as well, and we
Yeah.
together before, came up with the idea of taking various historic pandemics along with the most current one and doing a comparison. And we're going to have the students end up producing essentially a public service announcement. So as far as the presentation is concerned, I created a table of contents. This needs to be updated because eventually I'm going to put a screencast in here. I'm going to create a screencast and put it, publish it in YouTube, and then just put the link in here so that this would be one of the first things that a student be able to do is look over everything that's been produced.
Mm-hmm.
So the next slide has basically a template that I think I have that template open. So rather than clicking on it, this template basically would have them look at information and organize their thoughts around the causes of the pandemic, the symptoms of the pandemic, and what the social or cultural impacts of the pandemic would be. And then looking at all the three that we chose, the most recent one and the Spanish influenza and the Black Death. So that's what this is basically me just saying, like, click on the template link and open it up and make a copy. And this, I'm going to talk to Casey about doing some sort of math integration activity, which has not been created yet. But again, you'll see here, here are the images that kind of relate to the various pandemics. And within this, all these images end up creating links anyway. So we could create links to any number of math activities, but that hasn't been done yet. And science integration as well. So what I included to help with that, putting the information together around the causes, symptoms, and impacts were written sources in here. And this is just a table of contents of these written sources. So any one of them, if you click this, that's actually clicking the number, but if you click that, you can see that something would pop up with a written source about, in this particular case, it is the Spanish influenza pandemic. But I balanced it so there's 2 for the Black Death and 2 for the Spanish influenza and 2 for coronavirus. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to incorporate video sources, so I put videotapes on the bookshelf instead, title the video sources, and there are links to those various video clips as well. In addition, because they're creating a public service announcement, these are bookcase links to PSA creation websites that basically just give information. So again, if here's one that's PSA step by step. So there's any number of, of course they can go individually and look for stuff if they want, but I wanted to give them at least a base of information to work with as far as creating a public service announcement. And the last slide so far, I have the learning standards, which I created a PDF of the learning standards that we're going to meet. And then I think those need to be updated as well. But for now, I put this in there so the students would know what the standards were that they were working on for this particular module. Mm-hmm. And the questions I had, and I shared this with Team 3 before we all met, that, should we include, again, a science activity, visual comparison of the causes. There's going to be a math activity that will be put in. I'm not sure if we need to put, because we filled in that form that had the factual, conceptual, and procedural knowledge that the students are going to have to, what they're going to need to know and understand and to do, and whether that should be part of the presentation as well. I also wondered because I found several rubrics for end projects, because again, the PSA doesn't have to be a video. It could be a broadsheet or a flyer or a poster or any number of things. I wanted to kind of leave it open as far as what they were going to create for an end project. But I did find some rubric examples for all of those, and I'm not sure if that should be included in the presentation as well. This is a question for myself, whether I want to take that comparison template and not leave it as a Google Doc that they will make a copy of, but instead convert it to a PDF that they can then download from there and use it. And then I'm just reminding myself, did you guys hear about Team One? Do you know about the Grackle overview?
I don't know anything about it. I saw Morgan's email about it.
Yeah, so that question is just reminding me to look through this presentation and do the Grackle overview and see what adjustments need to be made to make it user-friendly.
Okay.
So I saw there was all sorts of stuff popping up in the chat. Were those questions for me or?
Oh, I didn't see
Feedback
them.
instructions, okay.
Oh, I see them there.
It's the format we use this summer.
Yes, I don't remember.
For 15, and then we take notes, and then we can ask questions.
Okay, but we did not have to record those, right? It was just a matter of using that doc as a basis for the process. Yes.
No, I think we're going to type in it, unless you want to take notes on what we tell you.
I was just wondering about that too, Drew. I wasn't really sure whether we were typing or people were just using it as a flow, to organize the flow of what we're saying.
Right. Jeremy, do you remember during the summer that we did use the document and enter information in it when we shared?
No, but I think because we have the scoring rubric approach now, that I think it's geared towards us crossing things off on our scoring rubric.
Oh, okay. Because I don't recall doing it in the summer. That's why I'm asking.
No, I mean, I feel like now that I think, and I guess I inferred was that so you guys go for 15, we take notes, and then we report back to you. And then I think you use the rubric that's read at the top, 10 through whatever, 16 or whatever, and you take notes on what we tell you. Using the warm process, and then at least that's how Morgan explained it to us on Zoom last week.
Okay.
And I don't even know if we record anything in it. I think it's mostly just for conversational purposes, really.
Yeah.
Because I think we're all hitting the same target that's somewhat known to us, since this is not our first go round, right? For a lot of us.
Just for me.
Yeah, and we got your back.
So just be prepared that I may ask some questions when it comes time for me to look at a document
Good.
you guys are presenting.
Yeah.
Do you want to share, Drew? Do you want to share the that protocol just to see if you covered everything that we might ask you about before we ask you?
No, I think I'll just
You just wait.
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have 3 separate components to your module? I mean, do you want to go through and the other, Chris-Ann and Casey, do you have something that you'd like to share as well, or are you all working on the same thing? I just don't know the format of your work.
The one. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
You're
Drew-
separate.
Oh, you're separate? Okay.
Yeah.
Drew and Doug are working on a module with Casey. And then Casey and I are also working on a module.
Okay.
Got it. What's the name of your module called, or your 2 modules called?
The one I just showed you, we called it PSA Pandemic Comparison.
Okay, I wrote that down. Yeah.
And then Casey's and mine is called Our Ocean, Our Health.
Okay.
Well, it's mainly Chris Ann's, and I just have a small math piece in hers,
Aw.
and I have a
And Casey.
small math piece. But yeah, most of it's hers.
Do you want to, shall we give feedback to Drew's first, or should we see all of your thing and then look at it as a whole? What's most useful?
It would make more sense to me to give feedback immediately after each presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm cool with that too.
Why don't we shall we just do that?
Sure.
Of
I feel like
course.
That sounds good.
Oh, COVID-19, this is my COVID brain. I wanted to say I really liked I thought it was really lovely to have the little clickable icons and the little explanation of what they are, but it's fun. It makes kids want to follow, oh, what's in this one, what's in that one. I think that's a nice touch. and it looks really nice and sequential and straightforward. Now, as far as whether I'm reading the little document that I'm supposed to be looking at right now, I don't think I'm looking at that. I don't know if I'm supposed to look at that as we
Yeah,
go.
let's look at it. Are you talking about the interactive slides though, Liz?
I'm talking about the interactive slides, but also that they are user-friendly. They just look inviting and
Yes.
easy to
Humanized.
and so it's like, I don't know, there's something about that visual that makes a kid know, oh, I've done the one on the top shelf, now I'm going to the second shelf in addition to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think that's nice. That's a nice touch. And an interesting concept to be looking at the 3 sort of major pandemics. That it just feels like let's gutsy. Let's look right at it. What's going on here? I like the concept. So
Can I ask a question about 14? Because I definitely see 10 and 11. I'm not sure about 12 really, but I think it's probably embedded. And then I'm curious about 13 and 14. About the screen time activities. I think that's maybe where the art comes in. I don't know. Like you said, you mentioned the broadside.
Yes, but they don't necessarily have to create a video. There's, any
Yeah.
right, we kind of had that same idea.
their PSA.
And then the prerequisite knowledge, is that just current event, like kind of current events, and then going with history, and or how are you getting that scaffolding for the number 14?
I thought I feel like the creating that graphic organizer would have the 3 components of the
Okay.
causes, symptoms, and effects, and then
Oh yeah.
comparing it to the 3 pandemics themselves, using that either the video or a combination of the video and the written sources. And of course, they're always welcome to find their own, but I wanted to sort of establish a baseline of sources for them to have in the module itself, as opposed to looking independently.
So then they can kind of cultivate their choice based on the things that kind of seem more appealing or more interesting to them too, right? Isn't that part of, there's like some choice in there?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
I had the same question, Drew, that you did around how much should I, did you want to put in about any prerequisite knowledge, or I don't know, it just seems like the rubric of what kind, because I too am somebody who likes to leave the options open for the kind of project a kid is going to do, but I think that makes it really tricky to offer, okay, now here are 18 rubrics. Pick the one that matches the thing that you're thinking right now. And it just is hard, but at the same time, to not have any kind of rubric attached would be maybe a little too open-ended. So I don't have an answer for that, but I'm wondering what you're leaning toward.
Yeah, but I'm feeling like I have found a handful, and I was thinking again, when I create the screencast that will kind of walk them through the module itself, I think including that and saying like, here's a sampling of rubrics for the various mediums that you could use to create your public service announcement. You can choose these, or use these as sort of a baseline, find another rubric elsewhere. I just leave it like that. So again, you have the choice of what they're going to produce, and how they're going to make sure that they produce something of quality based on a rubric of their choosing.
Right.
Are you you said a walkthrough? Is that going to be like kind of like the interactive slide piece with your Bitmoji, but like you narrating it almost?
Yes.
Oh, I like that. That's cool.
That's what I did for the summer one too.
Nice.
That's awesome. So the prerequisite thing, what's your grade level span again for this?
9, 10.
Are you integrating anything to do with health at all? Because I know that we, at the high school where I worked, 10th grade health course does a lot with disease. And one of the things they did for a project last year was they'd have little filming teams, and there would be a doctor, a patient, and then the filmer, and then they would all work together with to come up with the media, like the content of the awareness. Like, if this is about Ebola, what do we need to know? And it was.
You might find that you're hitting health targets even if you haven't looked at them. So you might just look through and see if there's some easy health targets that you're already prepared
Yeah,
for.
that's what I mean. Yeah.
And I think I'm going to take a look real quick at Doug's part,
Yeah.
because I think that some of his science stuff
Right.
will sort of in the
Right, that might very well be, and that could
Phases
gather.
might-
You're actually working with data too.
Oh yeah.
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 So he's doing like kind of a little bit of there's a little bit of genetics kind of built in there too, probably somewhere, huh?
Yeah, because he has questions, during the time periods, what did people do to try to prevent the spread? What was successful, what was unsuccessful? So there is sort of a health component.
Mhm.
What should people do in order to stop the spread? So it's kind of taking like what, the PSA messages that we are hearing with today's phenomena
Mhm.
and applying it to the historical.
Cool.
Yeah, it is.
So were we supposed to keep going down on the form? Where, like Morgan mentioned, start with the warm feedback, and then there was like something else to do, but I don't know how that works.
I think it's just like ask any questions if we're wondering about something, and I feel like we have.
Yeah, I agree.
What would be, is there anything more that would be useful to you? Are there any specific spots in the, I mean, that you haven't mentioned that you're like, well, I was really wondering about how this is coming along?
Not that I can think of. I kind of, I did a little self-assessment, like I showed you that box, the present box, where I just typed in those questions for myself and for
Right.
the team to like, this is what I'm thinking about right now,
Yeah,
whether or not I should, fix them or what it's going to look like. But
right.
I feel like I'm close or
Yeah.
that close.
I do too, but I also appreciate that these are still works in progress, and that it's not done until we hand it in. So a lot of things can, change or get developed a little bit.
Yeah.
But
So I
think
figured.
it's looking like it's pretty much coming together.
So I figured out what my question was. With Morgan said the top part with red is the warm, and then down below was we're supposed to give you what our vibe on if you the SEL, the DEI, and the SPED and other things.
Mhm.
I guess that's my question is what's your goal for DEI and how are you going to get that embedded in there?
I do not have an honest answer for you right now.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I think in itself, I was thinking about your presentation and I'm like thinking about ours. And I'm literally wondering, because it's twofold, right? You've got the SEL piece where they need to be on the screen to know what the SEL is, but then the SEL is like, well, you need to get off the screen.
Right. The getting
So
on the
there's
screen.
like all these layers.
There are, and I don't know, I thought Morgan said just touch lightly upon the SEL and the DEI part, because that is kind of coming along through the platform. I think some of those things are part of embedded in the platform. But the other thing is that I mean, one of the struggles that we had is like, okay, now we're going to get into the diversity piece. And that it just moves the whole project in a different direction sometimes. So if you're talking about pandemics, I mean, clearly one of the stats on the pandemic we're in now is all about how it's affecting our communities of poverty and communities of color so much harder than some other communities. So, I mean, maybe it's just a matter of
Oh, though, Liz,
somehow adding some information that addresses the needs of a variety of people.
you know what though? So this is kind of interesting. I'm starting a fire. That's what the stick is. But at my at my high school, my bio teacher is. So first of all, step back a minute. My bio teacher's wife is a dermatologist, and she's been working with Colby for quite a while and using, believe it or not, art as a way to teach about inherent bias, which is practical because prototype bias is something that's real in the medical field. Okay, so he's taking on this and he's actually partnered with Bowdoin, and he's actually using Monty Python as a way to teach kids about bias, like the whole constitutional peasant skit. It's like one of the things. So I wonder if I don't know. I wonder if he's doing some kind of research project on it, but I wonder if there's a way to do bias and science kind of the way he's doing it.
Oof,
And I don't know if he'd be open to
science is
sharing
always
that
a
at all.
bias. It gets ugly pretty quickly when you go with science and bias. That's the trouble. But there are lots of options you have to,
Yeah.
if you wanted to go that direction. I'm a little concerned about time because we're almost at 4:30 and I want to make sure we hear Christiane and Casey before Casey has to go.
Yeah, go for it.
Timekeeper.
We did the 15 minutes though. We're past, that ran out.
Okay.
So can we do another 15 for them? All right, I'll do it here too.
So you ready for me to screen share
Yeah.
Holla.
the next one? Okay.
I think that's about the only thing I'm ready for these days is a cup of tea and a Zoom.
Okay.
Nice. I like the title.
Not nearly as
Pretty.
well-rounded as Drew's or finished or yeah. So it's Our Ocean, Our Health, and just teaching the kids about climate change and plastic pollution and how those things affect us from day to day and affect our future. But it's at the end, which I've left until the very end and I haven't added in, there's an art activism activity that's like the culminating project, and they'll have their choice between two activities of how they can get involved and make a difference. Basically it's a lot of slides with a lot of links to watching things. Then I have a couple of ecology and marine biology worksheets that I'm going to be discussing with Doug to add those in for an activity. And then giving them some background on how people have been talking about this for decades, starting with Rachel Carson, giving them some excerpts to read from Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and Aldous Leopold's Sand County Almanac. Going a little deeper into climate change and how it specifically affects the ocean and then the planet, with clips from Racing Extinction and some NASA graphics so that they understand CO2 and carbon sequestration a little better. And then what happens to the ocean when it absorbs too much CO2. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Come back here. Some examples from noted science places, Yale and Smithsonian, on ocean acidification for background research. When you guys mentioned DEI, I haven't put this in specifically yet, but there will be a unit specifically on social injustices, climate change and pollution, how that affects people of lower income and race. There's a unit, this is going to be a whole separate unit on understanding plastic pollution and how that affects the ocean, but also affects us. Basically, kind of what goes around comes around, because as we put plastic into the environment and the ocean, it's coming back into our bodies. Looking at how the numbers add up, I'm kind of gearing up towards Casey's math presentation, but I haven't figured out the exact location of you know, I've got to move some stuff around. More things about plastic pollution. So basically these links and the things that I'm asking people to read and to watch I'm trying to get them to develop some sort of sense of empathy and compassion, because with art activism, you can't really convince somebody to do something or to take action about something unless they care. So it's like the whole background thing is getting the students to care. And so I go into a whole separate unit on compassion that's related. And having studied a little bit, I've studied things on my own for years, and then studied with Kelly Bailey with the SEL. I thought that one of the great things to do that leads up to one of the art activities is a walking meditation piece that they'll then use for a community cleanup towards the end. So I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but it's more stuff about developing compassion and friendships, more compassion, connecting with the self and community well-being, just basically talking about, taking care of yourself. You've all heard, you have to love yourself before you can love somebody else. And I think that kind of goes along with the planet too. We've got to love ourselves before we take care of the planet. Then we have Casey's, sorry, Casey.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this slide starts with like a site that Chris Sam found that has a ton of graphs, just graphs. And so then I looking at all the graphs, if you go to the next slide, I picked out 4 that are line graphs, and which are in the dark blue at the bottom. So I'm gonna have them choose a graph, and what they're gonna do is pick a decade, because it's basically most of them are from like 1950 till 2020. So pick a decade and plot that decade worth of points. I did an example for them on macroplastics in the ocean surface from 2010 to 2020. Go to the next one. So I plotted the points, and then I'm having them draw a line of best fit. And there's a video that will show them how to do a line of best fit. Next. And then there's my line of best fit on the decade that I chose. Yep, go ahead. So then it's, once they find the line of best fit, then we're gonna find the equation of the line. So first you gotta find the slope. So take 2 points that are on the line of best fit, use that formula to find the slope. And then they're gonna use the slope intercept formula of y equals mx plus b. And they're going to, there's a video to better explain slope intercept formula. And then what they're gonna do is they've got the slope, they're gonna take 1 point that is on their line, plug in the x and y, and solve for the y-intercept, which is the b. And then, so once they get the equation of the line, which for my example is the y equals 45,000, blah, 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 blah. And then for an extension, to have them make a prediction of what, so I chose 2025. So then they'll take, 2025 and plug that into their equation of the line and figure out what the answer would be for 2025. In my case, it's how many million tons of macroplastics are on the ocean surface.
Cool.
That's it so far. And a couple blank slides because there's still more.
Right.
There's more.
There's more.
Okay, then I go into a description of what is art activism and how can art activism help with climate change or pollution. And I'll have some links to some specific artists who do that kind of work. and it's kind of a daunting thing. So then the next thing is very simply, what can you do? And a couple of links on how to just get started with just one thing, and then go from there. And then I'll have the choice of art activism projects, which will link back to the SEL, the walking meditation for one, and the other one is not linked to the SEL or the DEI, but they could be. So that's as far as I've gotten.
Yeah, that's a lot, covered a lot of ground. It's, I'm curious about one of the things I really liked about the art activism piece in just that little next to last slide about starting, like making a little step in the right direction. I'm curious about your links. I'll want to look at those because I feel like, oh, that's always what I'm wondering is how can a kid or a person be where they are and then take a step in their own way in the direction of their choosing. So
yeah. Well, I've been doing that sort of thing with my classes for the past 5 years, where I've been teaching ocean health and environmental awareness, and teaching the kids about climate change, where it's not being covered in a lot of classes for many years, but now it's starting to be, thank goodness. And after I've explained to them what climate change is and how carbon sequestration works and ocean acidification and everything, and I just say, okay, so now you know every single thing that you do is emitting carbon, whether you're just talking or breathing, whether you turn a light off because it's using energy. And so I assigned them for homework. I said, so your homework until the next class is to find at least one thing that you do that is going to reduce your carbon footprint, whether it's not eating meat for dinner that night, or turning the lights off, or shutting your computer down, and turning the heat down, wearing a sweater, all sorts of things that they can do. And then they're kind of like, oh, okay. And each week goes by, they have more and more things that they start adding in. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, and you've gotten a lot of links in there, of course, of the videos and things we didn't watch, but I'm sure that there's so much material out there, and what you've linked, I'm sure, is really going to make an impression on them. And I love the math connection. I think that that's so great to just, okay, let's look at data. What's going on with this data? What does this line mean? What does this slope really mean here? And that just like helps them feel like math isn't just this separate thing that you do. It's embedded in what's really going on in our world. And I could see kids kind of riffing with the math idea and taking that farther and farther. I mean, there's so much you can do with math, but it could be its own little wormhole. I mean, kids can get into, exponential growth and decay, or, whatever, all kinds of things that are high school age appropriate math standards too. No, I like it. I'm wondering if we're looking at the sheets with all the questions on it, that the beginning, can you wing back up to the top of the slides?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions is it clear for kids what they're doing right from the get-go? And I guess that's one thing I would, I mean, for me, it's like the concepts just keep mushrooming, and then it's like, oh yeah, is a kid gonna know what to do and how to do it from my first slide? Do you feel like that's?
Well, truthfully, I don't even address the fact that they're going to be doing an art activism project in the end. So I should add that in.
Okay. I mean, I always feel like I'm always circling back and saying, well, what all did we talk about? Okay, this is what we're asking kids to do.
Yeah.
We talked about in our like little groups breakout before this that putting a table of contents
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
would really like focus, so they can kind of see the outline of what they're going to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that was one of the things after watching Drew's presentation that I said, oh yeah, I need a table of contents so that they can easily see that and understand what the consecutive steps are going to be.
Yeah. Oh, and I had another thought early on when you talked about Rachel Carson. Have you read the little slim volume, the sea around us.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Really beautifully written. I read it and I just went right back to the first page and read it again. It was so beautifully written. And I mean, certainly it's followed up by Silent Spring, which is more heavy hitting with the science piece. But just like, do you understand what the ocean is? And then I was captivated.
Yeah.
So-
Well, maybe I'll include some excerpts from that too.
I had a question about the math. Wondered how, and I know it's not done because you mentioned, Casey, that it keeps going, but how are you, I guess your learning targets are kind of embedded, right? Because there's kind of a narrative of sorts and almost like a, how do I say this? There's videos, if I recall correctly, right?
Yeah, there's just different like YouTube videos, like how to.
That's kind of the nuts and bolts of the why, right? For the why are we doing this math, and then they do the math, and then there's like this kind of culminating, which is the feature that I think you're working on now, but that culminating piece of carbon sequestration is something. Are you going to get into that kind of statistical evidence too, or is that too vast to really?
I don't think we're gonna get that far. We're just kind of looking at
Just overall quality. I guess that's a quality thing, right? Kind of a qualitative piece that's more of it's science, but I guess it blends really well with what's on the surface, what we can see versus what we can't see.
Right.
I see all kinds of ownership in your project, you guys. Like, I love that about it. You've done really well to say this is our planet, and all of these things are worth knowing about. I really see all of that in there, and I think there's SEL in that too. I mean, obviously in the walking part, but I'm encouraged to know what happens after the art is made, and is there and can that be like a diverse? Is there a diversity piece in that? I know we've always struggled with kids will be doing this, but they won't see the work of other kids, and I've always wanted to, if there's an art piece, figure out a way for our kids to see other kids' work. But is that anything that you guys have?
Actually, there is a connection there that I wanted to do at the end with the art activism choices, and then to have them do a writing piece reflecting on any interactions that they've had with people in the community, and reactions that they've gotten from the artwork that they've made. But then to encourage them to upload their work to the annual Bowseat Ocean Awareness Competition that happens every year.
Nice.
Yeah. Because that is, and there'll be a link in there for them to look through the previous examples of artworks that students have made for the Bowseat competitions, which are all basically ocean awareness and ocean activism pieces.
Could those be considered exemplars early on so kids could just see what might be done before they go through the whole module, or is that jumping the gun?
I suppose in the table of contents.
Yeah, right. It could certainly be there and anybody could look at it when they're ready. But
yeah, I could say see examples of other ocean art, or
from the conference, from the competition, or
yeah.
do they display previous years? Like
they do.
Oh,
Yeah,
that'd be real cool.
Well, that's nice. And I mean, I just find this whole process of being able to check in with another group. It's like, oh gosh, we got to be ready for something. We got to meet with people. So we better write something down. But at the same time, it's so nice to hear what other people are working on, because I'm also experiencing, like, we're doing this little snapshot, asynchronous thing in the middle of a life.
Hmm.
And then all this life goes on around it, and we've got to tether these little tendrils to the rest of life, but really we've got this thing that has to stand alone. I mean, really alone, because it's asynchronous. It's so challenging in that regard.
Yeah.
But I'm constantly saying, well, we want to thread out. You can go farther, 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 and maybe that's just the way it should be. That we're trying really hard to make something manageable, but it's by nature connected to other things, and that's a good thing. So it sounds like you've got a lot going on in your module.
Well, it's hard not to because it is connected to everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's the challenge.
Hmm.
Nice.
True. Take it for granted every day, don't we?
And I
Well,
think there's a lot of health in there too that we might want to take a peek at too.
right. And economics and jobs and careers. I mean, like it's attached to everything. And someone hopefully could even think, oh, how could art even be an avenue of expression that could lead me? Because when I was growing up, it was always like, okay, there's art and you can go that way and not really make a living, or you can do the other thing that's not art and make and I just resented that as the message I got. So this is an integrated conceptual, like how art is really fundamental to,
Right.
to
Well, I
help
had
with
a
other things in life.
I had an artist in residency with Bigelow Laboratories for Ocean Sciences,
Wow.
and one of the things that I was going to include on the slide where it says works by other artists will specifically be collaborations that these artists have made with scientists and people in
Great.
other disciplines to get things across.
I'm turning back the clock. I'm going to be 18 again, so I can start over.
Don't we all wish we could? Except I don't want to be 18 again.
I don't want to be 18 again, actually, Shirley, to tell you the truth. Oh, great. Well, we in the interest of time, I know Casey's got to run, and maybe Jeremy, do you want to share our screen and let our will speak for itself? We have.
I want to see part of yours, so I'm going to hang on for like 5 more,
Okay.
and then I'll just sign
Yeah.
off.
I want to show, so there's a couple of things to I'll show you the slideshow, but before we get into the word salad of it all, this is kind of where we didn't start where we thought we were going to start. I know you can't see me that well. I'm by the fire. I'm by my stove. My feet are warming up. But we have a similar module to the one that we are working on now. And that one was like, you make a piece of art, you do an identity chart, write a poem. It's an I am from poem. And when we decided to reinvent this current module that we're working on, so we got 2 modules. One of them is more fleshed out than the other, but it kind of made sense for us to go back in to our starting point, which is the identity chart. So I'm just going to share my screen and kind of show you that, which so we like the idea of an asset map because we're doing a community action project, and it may or may not end up as a speech. It may finally, be a film. It may be a presentation to a select board, but the goal of it is to have some orientation to self and to community first. And I just wanted to show you that's like our initial tool, is to give this to a kid in a notebook, say, here's a picture of it, but get your notebook out, go into your community and look for ties, like connections. So,
and that's where we differ, because I have a different view of that initial starting point. But I will agree that it is identity. But find out who you are first and what's important, and then go out into the community and see where you connect or don't in order to gather information about how to roll forward in your community. I think kid needs to know where they are coming from first before they roll out into the community. But that's par for the course.
So then we kind of looked around at the best way and I'll show you another document here in a sec, which is our slides. But so this year, at least I'm an art teacher. So what I've been doing with kids is leading them into, because I'm doing the 2 modes of it's really two strands, right? I'm doing the asynchronous when they're home, and I'm giving them, here, do that. And then in class, I'm trying to layer in, make what they're doing at home meaningful in when they're back in school again, because it's like one day off. You're in on a Monday, you're back again on a Thursday. So I really got to have that continuity. So I really liked I found about this on a National Art Ed Association blog, the SIPO thing. But what I did this year was, I haven't really been mentioning context. It's been like, context is there. Yeah, we know it's whatever the reason we're doing the art, but I've been really focusing on input, process, and output. Just as it's kind of an organic thing, right? You go and you gather information, you process it, and then you create your project, which I guess it's kind of a different way of saying these are the 5 E's, right? But it's there's a few less steps. So when Liz and I sat down to look at our module, which we thought was going to be a package curriculum that we were going to adapt from MICFA, which is the Soapbox Challenge, we basically said, look, we don't need the MICFA. It's got a copyright symbol on it. Let's create our own, and let's style it after really what reflects kind of the areas in Maine where we live, where, obviously we're stuck in our homes. It's COVID. We want a kid to be able to have community conversations and then take that and then kind of go out into the whole process of, where do I fit in? What's my passion? And knowing that it's very open-ended, right? So at first we're like, well, this is a struggle, but then we started to figure out we can probably put some diversity, equity, inclusion into it kind of at the ground level. So I'm going to show you the iteration that we worked on first, which is before the slideshow, which was essentially, we basically took Morgan's, and I can kind of show you what we did. You'll probably figure this out, I guess, but let me share here. So let me just share my entire screen. So we took what Morgan had made on tab, I think it's 5, with all the, the different colors, right? So we took that and we made this. No, wrong thing, hold on. Well, we did make this, recently we made this. But before that we took,
Initial flow chart.
where is it?
While you're talking, I'm just going to say that MICFA is similar in some regard to what did you call it? The Bauhaus Challenge or something?
Bow seat.
Bauseat. Bauhaus is something else.
BOW.
The MICFA Challenge. MICFA is the name of a Robert MICFA, or what's his name? Alden MICFA. He was from Chicago, a congressman. But he made a challenge that connected kids with their issues and gave them a voice and an opportunity to present to a group of people who could actually make change. And so that's why it's called the MICFA Challenge. And they still could do that after they get done with our module. They could take that next step to make it an actual game changer for their issue.
It was really good. Like it was a hands, head, heart activity worksheet where the kid would take this infographic and say, what do I think? What do I love? And what do I want to do with my hands, and then watch the MICFA Soapbox videos, do a tag review. What did you tell, ask, and give, what you liked, and then now make your own. And it was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. But then we ran into can we use it? Well, we never heard back. So we do want to orient the kids towards that, like she said, with the bow seat. And this is right now, we don't have a ton of student-facing materials designed other than our slideshow with some links. So we started with the guiding principles and created kind of the guiding principles we were after, because if it does culminate in a public speaking thing or a presentation outside your home, it could be a club, or if you're in a hybrid, if we're still in hybrid or remote, you want to present this to a school club. Say you have an Interact club at your school, or if you want to present it to a select board, or if you want to, I don't know, through adult ed. I mean, there's different ways. Aside from that, we're still really enmeshed in how a kid is going to totally understand this and use it. So it's mostly, Liz, I would say it's mostly social studies, ELA.
Yeah.
We haven't quite gotten the math in there yet, but
We have some data. I mean, at one iteration of it was a lot of data crunching for the town in order to build a needs assessment, like what's really going on in your town. But then we backed off of that because that's a kind of a whole different project. And I think it's really involved to get involved in real data, and it might be really sensitive. So I backed off of the data idea, although it's doable. I don't know that I want a 16-year-old really looking at who the poor people are in town. Oh, there are 3. Oh, they're my neighbors. They're across the street. I just didn't want that.
well, I think another thing too that was interesting was David Greenham from the Holocaust and Human Rights Center told us about mikvah. And by the way of that conversation, he also kind of pointed to me in this direction to go contact the First Amendment Museum guys who are undergoing a 2-year renovation of the First Amendment and are trying to figure out if there's a way they can use the Moose learning as a way of getting kids to connect with, their goal is this thing called Represent Maine. They want to have, they think every kid in the state should be able to connect with their legislator. So if our module 1 is based on what's in your community, how can you affect change, what are your assets, do you have a strategy that supports changing things positively, that would be module 1. And then module 2 would be like, okay, so now you've done this, now it's time for you to meet with your legislator, learn about the system, government, civics, and then even, I don't know, Liz, because you have to look at kind of our exemplars. We designed this with, the backwards way, which is like, so who's done this and what does it look like already? So a couple of things that come to mind was a student that I had who designed for their high school project, they designed the Wayne Farmers Market. It didn't sound maybe like a lot then, but like I looked it up and it was like Wayne Farmers Market. The website is still there. I think it's like .weebly.com. And I had this kid in digital photography in like 2000, graduated in 2009, and the website she created is still there. She created the farmers market. It's obviously it's not her project anymore. And I think that's part of the beauty of it too, is that this was an idea created by a 17-year-old. And then in this town, it still exists. And now here's the thing, mostly white people, right? And mostly middle-class people, and the demographics don't really speak to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but is there some kind of an economic connection there because we're using the diversity of economics? Is there a way to leverage that? I don't know, but
a lot of the farmers markets now accept people's, I don't know exactly what they're called, but they'll take their credits or tickets or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, they'll do Wicker Snap, right? Too.
Yeah.
That's great. Thanks for that reminder, Chrisanne.
Yep.
So that was kind of our initial show. We were like, okay, we're not gonna be able to do the soapbox